Can you brew green tea in 5 seconds? In this video, we're going to find out. We're going to be trying an unusual flash brewing method that was recommended to us by one of the tea farmers we work with, and we'll compare the flavor to the classic Genmaicha Brewing. Let's get started. Okay, so here I have two different dishes filled with the Gyokuro Genmaicha. So this is the most popular Genmaicha that we have currently at neoteas.com, and it's made from shaded tea leaves. So these leaves are shaded for a longer time, and this actually reduces the bitterness. It actually makes the color a little bit darker, so that's why these leaves are darker compared to a typical Genmaicha. And it's actually going to reduce some of the bitterness thanks to the shading process. But what I want to find out today is how a flash brewed Genmaicha compares to a typical 1 minute Genmaicha brewing. So on this package, for example, we have the recommendation from the farmer to prepare the tea at 95 degrees Celsius or 203 Fahrenheit for 30 seconds. We've even seen a measure of 5 seconds, which is what I want to test today. So I want to test a super fast flash brewing versus a longer brewing at about 75 degrees Celsius, which is what I typically prefer for Genmaicha. So first we're going to take these leaves and we're going to put them into the strainer. So as I've mentioned before, normally I would prefer to use a Kyusu teapot because this is going to allow more space for the leaves to expand and release their flavor. But for these tea experiments, I do like to use a strainer because it keeps everything consistent. So what we're going for here is not necessarily the best cup of tea, but we want to just keep all the variables the same so we can test one tea compared to another. And that's what we're going to be doing here. So on the right, I have a thermos filled with 75 degrees Celsius water. And on the left, I have a freshly boiled kettle filled with water that's about 95 degrees Celsius at the moment. So first, I'm going to go ahead and pour this in. Unscrew this here, and then so we're going to let that brew for about a minute. Then this one is only going to brew for 5 seconds. Okay, so that's out there. This one's still brewing. So lower temperature, longer time, higher temperature, very, very short time. We're going to compare and see what the difference is. Okay, so just comparing the color. There is a pretty big difference. This one's significantly darker, more yellow, a little bit less translucent. So if you do the finger test, clearly this one's much more see-through than this one. And so even though it's being brewed at a higher temperature, it's being brewed for such a short amount of time that it's not able to really get the same level of extraction. So just to explain the differences in extraction, the bitter components of the tea, for example, like the catechins, these are kind of the more difficult parts of the tea to extract, and these are extracted at either a longer brewing time or a higher brewing temperature. So this is why you don't typically brew green tea with a really hot water, because you're going to end up with a very bitter flavor because you're going to extract so many of these catechins. What you want is a little bit of the catechins, a little bit of the polyphenols, so you have a little bit of that bitter flavor, but you don't want it to completely dominate the taste profile of the tea. You want there to be kind of a balance and an interplay with these different subtleties. So in this case, if the flash brewing theory is correct, even though we're using a very hot water temperature, we're brewing for such a short time that the bitterness should not overpower the tea, and we should get some of this toasted rice flavor, some of this slightly grassy flavor, maybe a little bit of this sweetness as well. But we're going to find that out here. So first, let's start with the normal. This is what I would consider the normal because this is how I brew. Okay. This is probably going to be too hot to drink because it's 95, but I'll do my best. I would say overall, this one has more flavor to it. So the longer brewing time definitely compensated for the decrease in temperature here. So it's worth noting that this package does say to brew for 30 seconds, but I have seen recommendations from some of the farmers that we work with to actually brew for 5 seconds. So far, I would say that the 5 seconds is probably just a little bit too short, but there still is plenty of flavor here. So one of the great things about green tea, and Japanese green tea in particular, is that as soon as it's brewed, it's ready to drink right away. So it's kind of like that perfect temperature for drinking between 60 degrees and 70 degrees Celsius. But I've been drinking a lot of white tea and oolong lately, actually, and it's difficult for me to get used to because it's like scalding hot as soon as it's brewed, and you actually need to give it a little bit of time before you can drink it. So it's just kind of like a little lesson in patience. This tea right here, 95, is just not quite ready to drink, unfortunately. But I'm doing my best to kind of sip it very carefully so I can kind of cool it off as I drink it, and I might just need to give this a little bit more time. Okay, so now I've given these teas a chance to cool off a little bit, and I've had a chance to taste some of the flavors. This one is definitely way more flavorful. I'm getting more of that toasted rice flavor, which is very important in a Genmaicha, obviously. And I'm also getting a little bit more of this kind of, I wouldn't say quite sourness, but it's more of like a freshness. It's kind of like this fresh, citrusy kind of tasting profile. And then with this tea here, it's definitely much more minerality, less flavor overall. Yeah, we're definitely not getting, we're getting some of that toasted rice for sure, a little bit of that fresh citrusy flavor, but it just definitely leaves a lot to be desired compared to this one. So maybe in another video, we will try out this 30-second brewing time that's recommended here. But I would say this flash brewing does not really hold up. I've heard this recommended be in the past to use like a boiling water for 5 seconds, and I'm really not seeing it here. So try this tea out, maybe brew it for yourself at higher temperature for 30 seconds, and also try it at 75 degrees Celsius for 1 minute. This is my personal favorite temperature. So what you want to look for in a Genmaicha is you want this nice balance between the toasted rice flavors and a little bit of that grassiness, maybe even a little hint of that sweetness as well. That's why this Gyokuro Genmaicha is so popular, because it's made from the long shaded tea leaves. And these are going to tend to be sweeter and have less bitterness to them. So it creates this nice little balance between the flavor of the toasted rice and the tea leaves. So just consider that when you're playing around with the brewing temperatures and the brewing times. This is really what you're looking for in a Genmaicha tea. But how you get to that point is up to you. If you want to use the hotter temperature and the longer brewing time, it's up to you. So thank you all so much for tuning into this tasting. I hope you found it helpful. The final verdict is that this flash brewing is just a little bit too short, even at the boiling, to get that perfect flavor profile in a Genmaicha.